This is the fourth episode of the Sustainability series. In this 6-episode series, you will hear from designers working in Australia, Spain, Argentina, Indonesia, Finland, and the United Kingdom. We like to think this series as an opportunity to explore geographic diversity. In this episode, I'm excited to share a new approach I've been exploring. This episode is part of a concept I've been developing, and it was recorded live during one of our weekly meetings with the network of designers working in government here in Finland. Let me give you some context. Every Thursday, we gather as a group of around 70 designers to learn from each other or host external guests. When it's my turn to lead these meetings, I take a slightly different approach. Instead of asking our guests to prepare a presentation, I interview them directly. These interviews are recorded live during the session, and now I'm publishing them as part of the podcast. The format is simple but engaging, I think. After my interview with the guest, I open the floor for questions from the audience. This creates an interactive dynamic where everybody can participate, and it also serves as both a live podcast recording and an enriching meeting for our network. The interview you'll hear today follows this exact format. It's part of this new experiment, and I think it worked very well. More episodes like that will be coming soon, so stay tuned. My guest today is Emma Berg, an environmental designer working for the City of Helsinki. In this interview, we talk about designing a service from scratch and how to design a service to save energy together with housing companies. We also talked about the network of designers for the environment in Finland. My name is Mariana Salgado. This is Diseño y Diáspora.
Hi everyone, my name is Emma Berg. I work for the City of Helsinki in the Urban Environment Division. And in the Urban Environment Division, there is the Building Control Services, or for the Finnish speakers, it's rakennusvalvonta. And under rakennusvalvonta, there is a team that does energy advisory for housing companies. So we're trying to make Helsinki carbon neutral by reducing the emissions mainly from heating, which is the biggest source of emissions, carbon emissions in Helsinki for now.
So Helsinki has proven to be carbon neutral by which year?
2030. So it's not far away.
Okay. So I guess you have been working in the development of many services. We are going to talk about one, right?
Yeah. Today we will talk about the service that we've been developing for the past 3 years. So 2021 we started with the energy advisory, and I wasn't part of the team originally, but there were, I guess, 8 engineers back then. And then my manager or team chief quickly realized that, okay, the 8 engineers, maybe we might need a service designer or somebody else who's not an engineer. So that's when he contacted me, and that's how I ended up here. And we've been trying to make the service good for the users, of course, since 2021. But since it's this kind of consultancy type service where we go to housing companies and we tell them, like, what could you do? We actually go into the meetings, and then we of course have like a phone service and website and the whole thing. But we've been doing that since 2021, and when we started, it was clear that okay, we need to reduce the emissions. And since our budget actually comes from the Carbon Neutral Helsinki funding, so it's all the carbon neutral money, because Helsinki sees that when the housing companies reduce emissions, then those are Helsinki's emissions as well. So we thought, okay, let's do this. It's unbiased, free advice, a free service for all the housing companies, which are consisted of just like regular folks in Helsinki.
So what is a private housing company?
It's one of those, I guess I would say, Nordic anomalies where I guess you could call it like a housing co-op. So a housing company is all the people who live in one or a few buildings which are on the same lot normally. They form this company and they all have shares and they make joint decisions together. So it's not so the renovations, at least all the bigger renovations that are not inside the flat. So for example, these heating renovations are always decided by the housing companies.
Okay. So can you tell us about the service? How do I know that this service exists if I live in Helsinki?
Yeah, so since 2021, we've been doing a lot of marketing as well, because once you start a new service, then you really have to let people know that this exists. So we've been pouring also a lot of our budget into marketing, which has been also a big part of my work. And since the beginning, we've been thinking about how do we talk about this? Like, is it because for the city this is climate work, but for the housing companies it's mostly about budget and cost savings and you could say maybe energy security to some companies, but mostly cost savings is a big part of the motivation for housing companies. So we've been thinking about okay, how do we talk about this? So we've been having a lot of social media promotion and newspaper articles and media work. And so we've been trying to promote the service and do the service at the same time. So, and now I could say one more thing, that now if you ask Google what is an energy renovation in Finnish, they will go to our website. We have the definition. So I think that's the hallmark of okay, at least we did something right, because we can answer what is an energy renovation.
Okay, so I live in a building some building housing company, let's say, or something. I have a flat, and then I want your services. And what happens then?
Yeah, then if you hear about us, then you probably hear our website, or that okay, this kind of service exists. You could find us through, the city counseling or the neuvonta. You could call into the phone line, or then if you found our website, then you could contact us by phone and so on. So you would send us a form maybe, or an email, or a phone call, and you would say that I need help. And that's actually one of the the biggest okay, what is this and how do we do this? What could we do? That's the biggest the main share of our, I guess, our customers come in with this that they don't know yet very much, and that's fine, because that's where we help. So you would contact us, and then we'd be okay, what is your address, and how I guess how is your role in the housing company? Are you in the board, or are you a shareholder? Because then you have different options depending on which role you have.
Okay, let's say that I don't trust the people in the board, and I would like to get advice, because I would like to know if what they are doing is they are good decisions.
Yeah, I guess now actually, if you contacted us right now, and you were I'm not sure if they're saving energy, or if the decisions are good, then we would probably advise you that okay, spring is coming soon. There is the board meeting at for the general assembly for the housing company, or the yhtiökokous. And then in the general assembly, we would give you maybe this kind of a form where you could just be I propose that we get this and this, that we start contacting the energy advisory. We have this kind of forms that you could just print out and send to the housing company board. So in the next meeting, they would have to at least have some kind of opinion of okay, should we do this, or at least should we start getting to know this? Or then they would answer you, oh, we are already part of this, or we are already customers.
But Emma, tell me, what is the service about? Do I get a person advising me personally, with?
Yeah, you will get one of our amazing engineers would contact you, whether it's Tilda or Samuli or Ansku or somebody. They would contact you personally, and then they would either, depending on what you prefer, either on email or by phone, or sometimes I know that some people used WhatsApp with customers. Maybe that's not the official channel, but you would get a personal advisory from this person, from an engineer who is specialized in energy topics.
And they will explain me the pros and the cons of the different systems.
Yeah. Or I think the most beneficial would be if you would contact also the board, because they are the ones who make the decisions regarding stuff. So we would try to, of course, get you on board with them as well, so that we would talk to everybody at the same time. That would be best. because then everybody would be on the same level and then they would have the discussion. So normally we go into a board meeting or a housing company meeting or in the general assembly and we're like, hey, this kind of thing exists. We checked out your housing company and the lot, and it seems like this, and this maybe windows, or have you checked your insulations? And this kind of stuff could be the things that could come when you're doing your next renovation. So you could check these out. And then once you start doing something else, you might also do some energy related stuff at the side.
So it's like a very interesting decision that the City of Helsinki decides to have a bunch of engineers that are advising these housing companies, right? Like that they are only there like answering phone calls.
Yeah, they are answering all the calls from the citizen. And it's not always housing companies, but that's where we are a housing company advisory per se. But if somebody else asks up like a company, maybe like a private person about their own, even though it's not a housing company, or about their own house, there are other advisory services in Finland that exist. But if we have time, we also always give a little bit of advice as well for those.
And how have you been evaluating the performance of this service?
Yeah, that's a really good question, Mariana, and a really important question, because since the beginning, we have had some targets of like how many customers per year, how many renovations per year, and so on. And we've been gathering, of course, customer feedback. But the issue with that is that the renovations are often like many years in the making in the housing companies, especially the big ones. So once we start here, okay, today Mariana contacts us, and then we advise you, and then you kind of grew in the housing company, and then maybe next year you will start doing something, or the year after that. So once we ask you later, like, okay, have you done something? You don't even remember that the beginning, or at the beginning, you don't have such a big motivation to answer our questionnaires. So that's why we are looking at like the big targets of Helsinki and like how many renovations are going there. But of course, all the regular customer feedback, NPSs, and the first we asked, once we go into the housing company, we ask them right after, like, how was it? And the feedback from there has been super good. Then after 6 months, we're like, hey, are you moving forward? What's going on? And then after a year, we ask them, okay, what's going on with you? Like, are you moving forward? And so on. And of course, since the beginning, we've also been looking at like where all our customers are coming from. And it was clear, even like first year and the years after that, it was clear that most of the people who were contacting us were from the better off areas. So when we are thinking about our impact, of course, for the city, it doesn't matter where the emissions are reduced. But then if you're thinking about the sustainability impacts of services and like how we design the service, then it really has an impact on areal inequalities and disparities. If, let's say, only Lauttasaari, which is where most of our customers actually come from, or it is an area in the Western Helsinki, an island which is called the Island of the Happy People. So it's actually, it was clear from the start that many people from there and from the better off areas are contacting us. So this is one of the indicators that then eventually led us to start experimenting with different kinds of service approaches, because it was clear that this consultancy type service was good for the Lauttasaari people, but maybe not so good for the Malmi people.
So how do you think like a service designer changed the way that this service has been developed? I understood that this service you have developed from scratch, right? There was no service when you started.
Yeah. Actually, originally, like the first thing that I did was like, okay, we need a name for the service. Like it cannot be this kind of like, oh, there is an engineering unit inside the building control services that you can contact. Like that was the first thing that I was like, no, this will not do. And actually our team was called Energia Renaissance, so Energy Renaissance, and it's still called Energy Renaissance, but like none of the customers will understand what is Energy Renaissance. So the first thing was, okay, let's come up with a name. Then the second thing was like, okay, let's get to know who are our customers and what do they think, and in which phase of the process are they when they contact us, what is the journey that they go through, and so on. So I guess it's all the basic service design stuff, but then once you're also part of the implementation of the service, it gets a bit trickier, because then when we start to change something, then we ask, okay, which Excels do we change? Which meetings do we change? Like, how do we make this happen? And like, how do we develop the practices actually and implement them inside the service, and not just like on a conceptual level?
So if I understood it right, there was a certain systematization that you brought because of being a service design assigned to this development, right?
Yeah, I hope I did. I'm a very organized type of person, so I also set up like these different practices regarding how do we gather information and where is it stored and so on. But yeah, mostly the customer-centric approaches, I guess, and also like how do we measure, and that we even gather customer feedback. That was the thing that didn't exist.
So you realized that most of the clients were from one area of the city, and you were not outreaching other type of clients. So what did you do in order to work with the non-users, or to offer this to new people that were not even getting to know that this service exists?
Yeah, so originally we started, like we shifted all the marketing into the eastern side of Helsinki. So we were like, okay, let's market there. We will get the people interested at least, and that they will know what is energy renovation, or that they should save energy and blah blah blah. But then in a year or so, we realized, okay, this is not like it's not really helping. And then after that, the energy crisis hit. So, and then we had like users coming and customers coming from windows and doors and wherever they could come from, because everybody was worried about energy at that time, which was good that we had the service existing. But since we realized that, okay, we first tried the marketing approach, and then we went into the different events in those areas where there was a lot of potential, but customers were not coming in. So we would like get into those areas, and we realized that, okay, we still need a different approach. So what we did actually was we took the Environmental Center of Finland. We had this project where we discussed how could we get these energy renovations going in the suburbs. And there we got some ideas of like experimentation. So we started experimenting with the libraries and like bringing the experts into the libraries. So for example, in Kontula. And we realized that, okay, maybe like during those hours that we work normally, that maybe the Kontula library is not like the best place to be, but it was good that the library then knew about us and that we had connections in the area, because that was already helpful. But then we realized, okay, we need to make this into a project so we can try more approaches. So then we realized that, okay, we need somebody to lead this. And that's why we actually employed another service designer in our team. She's actually listening there. She's Tessa. And she has been doing this year these experimentations on like, okay, how do we do this aerial approach, or how do we get into those areas that are not doing the energy renovations, and how would we move those forward there?
So you went to the libraries. That was one strategy. And were there other strategies also?
Yeah, well, this year we're trying quite many things, especially the events. And I guess one of the things that I could mention is that energy renovations are these social phenomena, even though they, like you could say that, okay, now people understand that saving energy is a good thing. Okay. But then once your neighbor does something and you're like, oh, they have been doing something, maybe we should do that too. So the social character of the energy projects, it leads to this fact that once there are projects in a certain area, then they will multiply at some point. So once it is started somewhere, then they will grow once we communicate about those, at least. So what we started doing this year, and actually we're doing it even now, that we selected a few housing companies in those areas where there weren't a lot of projects, and we are actually paying for these energy surveys for them, so that they would find out about like an external consultant would come and check their systems and go through the housing company data, so that we could like get them on the path of like saving energy, because we realized that it's not enough that we communicate about this. It's not enough that we are also in the events or so on, but that we need to have examples in the area. And we have been promoting the examples that we already know, like in the media and what I told about, but then still we need like hands-on support, and we need to like have a few housing companies that are like these, our small pearls that shine in those areas, and then hopefully that will spread. So we started with this fall, and let's see how it goes.
This episode is part of the list Diseño Sostenible, D&D in English, Diseño y Gobierno, Políticas, Públicas y Diseño, Colectivos y Cooperativas de Diseño, Finlandia y Diseño. The titles of the list are in Spanish, but each list contains episodes in English or Portuguese. The D&D in English list includes all the episodes published in English. So far, we have 30. Over time, we've been building a solid collection, and if this is your first time listening to us, now you know there is plenty more to explore. Social design and sustainable design are deeply connected, as both aim to address systemic challenges and create solutions that benefit society and the environment. In the case of the Diseño y Diaspora podcast, sustainability is not just a standalone topic, it's woven into the fabric of every episode. Social design often involves rethinking system, practices, and policies to make them more equitable, inclusive, and environmentally responsible, which naturally aligns with the principles of sustainability. While all the episodes touch on sustainability in some way, or through discussions on community resilience, circular economies, or ethical practices, the podcast has a dedicated specific episode to explicitly explore this topic. By creating a series focused exclusively on sustainability, the goal is to give more visibility to the topic and highlight its importance within the broader context of social design. With over 120 episodes already published on sustainability, this series serves as a curated collection to address environmental and social challenges. It's a way to amplify conversations around sustainability while making it easier for listening to get to know the work of some design practitioners. Let's now continue listening to Emma, that she has much more to tell. You say that this type of development aligns with the triple model of sustainability in one of your writings. So would you like to explain what is this triple model of sustainability?
Yeah, I guess it might be called the triple bottom line, or then it could be called something else. But when you're thinking about sustainability, then always ask, what is it ecological? Is it economical, or is it about money, or is it about the environment, or is it about people? So is it social? So and when you're talking about energy, it is about all of these things, and that's why this energy use and energy expenses for housing companies, it has such a systemic effect. So when those well-off areas in Helsinki, they do the renovations, then obviously their amount of money that they pay for energy will also be reduced, so that then disparities between different areas will get even bigger. So, and then the social effect, well, I was also talking about like how energy renovations are a social phenomena, but then of course once the economics or the disparities between different areas change, then the social side can also like have an impact there. So even though the city, like I said, the city doesn't really mind where the emission reductions are coming from, but from a social and economical perspective, and this aerial perspective or regional perspective, then it really does matter like where the renovations are done, because then in the well-off areas, the houses are in like super good shape and they pay less for energy. So I don't think it's quite fair that then because there were also these subsidies for energy renovations. Now this year they already quit those, but then the ones who started early, so the well-off areas, they would get the most subsidies, and then they would still pay even less for energy. So there would be this like a big impact from that on the economics in the housing companies as well.
And you are also counting that. I mean, you are also like looking at the results.
Yeah, well, now this year we've been doing the experimentation, and actually in December we're looking at okay, how did we do? Like, did we get more contacts into those areas that were more quiet? But let's see. Like, the impact is not yet clear, but I would say that at least we have been present at the areas a lot more, and we have a lot of connections there because we know a lot of coordinators in the city. We know a lot of people who work in those areas, so in those regions and suburbs. So I guess we have a lot more like networks in there.
One of the things that you are doing is that you are the coordinator of the designers for the environment. And there is like a small network of designers working for the environment in Finland. Would you like to tell us about this work?
Yeah, I guess around the same time that I started this work with the service I'm currently employed with is I realized that, okay, I'm working with 8 engineers, and even though they're super good people and super nice, that I'm feeling a bit lonely, and I want to know if anybody else does this type of work in Finland. So I reached out in the julkismuotoilijat community, so in the governmental designers community, and I found some people who were doing similar work or working with sustainability, ecological sustainability or carbon or so on, and working inside the public sector or in different, I would say, maybe like institutions inside or close to the government or in the cities, and then working with service design approaches. And then we came together and we started meeting each month, and like we decided that we would want to promote sustainability and these approaches inside the design field. And after that, we've been writing blogs and going into newspapers or magazines sometimes, and like just like starting a LinkedIn account and everything like that. And I guess the main part of our work together is also the peer support of like, because these things are big and sometimes they can be a bit daunting. So when you're talking about climate change or carbon emissions, that it feels a bit hopeless sometimes, even though it shouldn't. And that's why it's important to have this kind of peer community where you can rage about stuff that annoys you, and then if you find something amazing, that you can share it with somebody who would benefit from it. So that's what the Designers for Environment are all about.
And what are your plans in the future? What do you think? How good developed your role there in the city of Helsinki?
Well, next year already we are starting a few things that are related to adaptation of climate change. So our team is a bit moving, like climate change is a reality, and we need to develop our service to be able to answer to questions of like, okay, so housing companies will have an impact from climate change. There will be effects. So, but they don't necessarily know about how to adapt to climate change, whether it's about cooling or rains or floods or so on. So we need to develop a service, our service, to answer to these questions, which is not only my work but the work of our team. But then, if you're looking at like the distant future, then I guess like the impact from our work on carbon emissions will decrease at some point, because the amount of carbon that is produced from heating in Helsinki will be reduced if Helen, which is the electricity and heating company in Helsinki, district heating, once they reduce the emissions from their energy production, then even though we do the advisory, we will not get as big effect. So that's something that we need to think about, and like, how do we get the impacts that we want, and what should we do in order to like reduce emissions in the long run as well.
So this is going to happen as an effort in the whole city with different departments, I guess, right?
Yeah, and especially with Helen, because the energy production is a big thing there. But then, of course, with the city, the adapting to climate change is a big theme that is now just like coming into discussions everywhere with the recent heat waves and floods, so on. So it is the thing that will be part of our future, no matter what we do now.
And what are the things that inspired you? What are you reading, watching, listening around these sustainability issues?
I guess even though science in sustainability can be sometimes a bit scary, but there are some I would say podcasts or articles that I'm always referring back to, even though they might be inspiring in the way that they are a bit scary as well. So sometimes I motivate myself with scary stuff to be, to have the motivation to do the work and to realize that our work has an impact no matter what we do, and that we need to push ourselves forward. So sometimes I would say science and science podcasts about sustainability.
No, but I need one title. I need one specific podcast or one specific book that you say, okay, please, if you want to go deep into these issues, I would recommend this.
Could I recommend a model for, because now I'm like, there are different episodes, but not necessarily like a series, because recently we did the Three Horizons workshop with the designers for environment and with the City of Helsinki. So Bill Sharp's, it's a tool for, well, you could say future, not scenario work, but work for, I guess, building strategies and pathways into a desirable future. So that's something that I would recommend, because we tried it a few times, and that's something that fits the designerly approach as well. So
tell us, how does it work, these three horizons?
yeah, the Three Horizons, it is like a three mountains type of an image and a model where you first think, what is the current system? Where are we now? So if I think about the energy system, we have certain parts there, which is the carbon coming from the emissions coming from maybe district heating. So we are burning a lot of stuff, and that's an issue. And then there is the Horizon 2, which is another mountain in the middle. So a transition. Okay, what are we trying? Which kind of approaches are we trying? Which kind of innovations are at play? So maybe our service could be one. So it's a transition. So we are there in the region 2 or in the Horizon 2, and then Horizon 3 is like what do we want the future to be like? Which values? What could it be at the best, or even sometimes at the worst? But like, what would be a sustainable new system that is like dominant after we transition into a carbon neutral energy system at some point? So this is one framework that really helps me in thinking about, well, our service, and also what are the technologies that we should promote and the approaches that are, whether they are Horizon 2 or Horizon 3.
So when do you recommend to use this framework?
Yeah, I guess if you want to build a strategy into like into some specific system of like, okay, how could we move from here to there? Or you want to build an understanding of like, how does this work? What are the experiments? So that's how I would recommend using it. And Sitra has used it for developing strategy specifically. So in strategic work, I would say, and that's what we do have to do also with our service of like, how do we create impact in the future? So that's why I was thinking that it would be helpful for us to.
So there's a question coming from our audience. How far into the future do you try to see yourself as a designer for the environment?
Well, this depends. Like when we were doing the workshops and we were thinking about like, okay, what is the year we want to discuss? For example, like what is the time scale? So we were thinking, okay, 2050. But then once like it, everybody who's a designer here listening knows that once you set a year limit, and then everybody's like, if it's far enough into the future, it's too far. Like if it's beyond our own like lifespan, for example, it gets too far. So I guess you need to have like a short-term strategy to have a long-term strategy. So for example, for Helsinki, we at least look at like, okay, we need to be carbon neutral. Okay, then we need to be, at some point, we need to be carbon negative so that we are taking in emissions. So I guess like when we are thinking about the future, I would say that 2050 is one of the things that I think about, like, okay, where will I be? How will like life look like? So that it's not too far into the future, so that I will be all about like, okay, self-driving cars are flying around and so on. So you all know that once you hit a certain amount of years, then you get into this.
It has to be realistic, in your opinion. Yeah. So when you do this, for example, the three horizons, do you work with which time span?
Well, it depends on which system you want to work with. But then, of course, if we were doing this for carbon neutral Helsinki, then I would do it for the carbon neutral Helsinki year for that time. But it gets really like the work depends, like, or it has a big impact, and the time discussion is a tricky one. So, but if you set it into the near future, then you will have a near future strategy, and if you set it for the longer, then you will have a longer term strategy, I guess. But I would say that for us to benefit most, even though all the horizons, like there's already some 2050 solutions, or, most of the 2050 buildings are already here. So we will not change much, like in the building stock, for example. So now the question becomes like, how do we get there? Like, how do we become carbon neutral, for example, with the buildings?
I guess it's very different when you do a workshop inside your unit and you are working with this tool of the three horizons. And then it's very different when you do this type of open workshops that you have organized as part of the conference of the International Gov Design Group, where whoever comes from whatever country, whatever unit, and they are not necessarily working with these issues. So what do you get out of in one and in the other, because it's completely different who sits in the table while when using this type of framework?
Yeah, if we were using it in my team, I guess the discussions would be very heated about like, okay, what is the future of geothermal heating in Helsinki? Like it would be like a lot of substance, the what we talk about at work, the technologies with the engineers, that's where the discussion would be a lot about. But then when we had the open workshop, we had to choose themes that everybody could relate to, even though they're not professionals in this field. So then the discussion is more, you could say it stays on a more general level, even though it is interesting, but I feel that once you're doing this strategy work, like it really helps if you have experts that are in this field. But our point in the workshops was also to like help people think with the method, or help people frame their thinking into the three horizons, and then they could use it later. Because as a tool for thought, I think it's really valuable. So, but yeah, it depends. And I can see that in my team, it would be a lot about, okay, like what is the future and what are the technologies and what should we use? So it really depends on the audience.
So the housing co-op model we have in Finland is not a common in other countries. So what do you feel are the benefits or pitfalls of the Finnish housing co-op model for driving the sustainability transition of the private housing context?
Yeah, the benefits of the Finnish model is that at least the decisions are made together in the housing company, so that once they decide something, then the decision is kind of final. That not one flat can like have their own energy source, for example. That so it's all a bigger system. So once you change the bigger system, you can have a bigger impact. But then the pitfall comes with the decision making and with everybody. Of course, the decision making in general is hard, but when everybody is not an energy engineer, then like how do you make decisions that are grounded in facts, and that everybody understands the facts and the benefits of like saving energy in the housing company? Then that becomes tricky. And then there is one more thing that is about the Finnish housing company model, that, for example, in Germany or in many countries in like parts of Europe, people pay their heating per flat. So they have a motivation to save energy inside the flat as well with the heating. But in our housing co-op model, then it's often so that the housing company pays, and then it goes into the different costs of the housing company. So there is not a direct link of like, okay, you are keeping all the windows open in your flat and you're using a lot more energy, but then you don't have to pay for it. You don't see it. It's not your expense. It is the housing company expense that then goes into all of the flats and is shared. So yeah, it has benefits, and then it has some pitfalls as well in the system.
So are there any qualities in that model that you feel hold untapped potential for driving that change, say? Again, it's a question from Tessa. Thank you, Tessa.
Yeah, there are qualities in the model and qualities in the housing companies. I guess what makes me feel inspired is also that people, it's people in the housing companies, and it's also generational. So that I would say that the younger folks are more in tune with the times in that way, that they're more interested in improving the housing company. And sometimes it is this discussion of like, okay, I don't have so many years left to live. I don't want to make these big renovations now because, it doesn't benefit me enough. And then the young families, they are more like, okay, let's do this. Like, we should put the solar panels and we should do everything that we can because we want to, reduce emissions and reduce costs at the same time. So I guess the untapped potential there is people, and that people have the power there because they have the flat, they have the shares that they can vote. So yeah, I would say that people are the untapped potential in the housing companies.
So it's about attitudes and it's about people's own motivation. But the model itself, do you think that it also brings some potential? The fact that we, instead of owning your own house, you own a share in a building housing.
Yeah, I guess there could be potential for doing other stuff too as a community, because you kind of build a community inside the housing company and you have shared finance and shared, yeah, at least you have shared practices. So yeah, there is potential there. I'm not, this is a good question, which I will still need to get back to. But yeah, there is potential for many things there, good things as well, and different kinds of services in the future as well. If the housing companies are aware of services that they could use, for example, for, I guess, shared cars or cargo bikes or something like this.
So Emma, what would you recommend to the Emma that just finished school and is thinking what to do as a designer?
Yeah, what to do as a designer? I guess try to find work in the public sector as well, or like try, because I feel that there's still not enough designers in the public sector, at least in some, like, especially where I work. Like, I've tried to get in designers here because I feel that it's important, and that we are still beginning here in the building inspection or building control services. So yes, at least check out the public sector and apply for roles that are not designer. Like, I am like my title is energy expert, even though I have literally no like education in that, but I have some experience from previous projects. So apply for roles that don't say designer and argue for the value of design there. And then, of course, build networks with different kinds of people that share the same ideas and values. So that would be, I guess, my best advice.
Okay, thanks you a lot for the interview. Emma is the coordinator of the Network of Designers for the Environment in Finland, a group I'm part of. This network has been a super good space for me to learn from colleagues who have been working on environmental issues for much longer than I have. It's a peer learning community primarily made up of designers working in the public sector, and it provides an opportunity to exchange ideas, share experience, and grow together. One of the things I appreciate about this network is the positive vibe and the spirit of collaboration that defines our interactions. There is a genuine willingness to connect and support each other. In this way, we can better understand the challenges we each face and explore innovative ways to address them collectively. The network also highlights the importance of building connections across different areas of expertise and also different organizations in the public sector. By bringing together designers with different backgrounds in environmental design, policy making, and the built environment, it creates a platform for cross-pollination of ideas. I think this collaboration helps us improve as individual practitioners, but also strengthens our collective ability to tackle complex environmental challenges. In a field as critical as evolving as environmental design, having access to a supportive community is invaluable. Thanks a lot, Emma, for this. As always, the music of this podcast is by Antonio Zimmerman. Sound design is by Julian Pereira. This podcast is published with Creative Commons license with attributions. This was Diseño y Diáspora. You can follow us on our social media channels in YouTube, Instagram, or Twitter, or visit our website. Remember to recommend us and recommend our books. By the way, did you notice that we published our second book on health and design? All our publications are online and for free from our website. Thanks for tuning in, and we'll see you in the next episode.